So hey guys, Grampa vs. Sexual Inadequacy is the 10th episode of Season 6. It was of course written by Bill Oakley and Josh Weinstein, and it was directed by Wes Archer. The story follows Grampa and Homer creating and selling a homemade tonic to help with the town's love life, which eventually ends up into a bigger feud between the father and son. We also have the B-plot with Bart and the kids trying to figure out what's going on with the adults. We also get some more Troy McClure, so we can't complain. Let's dive into the plot of this thing and discover if this one is good or bad. Just like the last episode I reviewed, Marge in Chains, the episode starts off with some glorious Troy McClure. But this time we get to see one of his old movies, titled Good Time Slim, Uncle Doobie, and the Great Fisco Freakout. I think like always, Troy McClure is a great opener. This one though doesn't really set up a plot point, it's just something to lighten the mood. But I'm not going to complain because I love me some Phil Hartman. We get 3 scenes showing that Marge and Homer's love life is not very active. After the year time skip, Marge has a conversation with Homer about it. Homer gives some excuses, but Marge wants a solution now. This is our inciting incident as it introduces the main conflict to the episode, or at least the conflict to open up. They decide to get a book on their marital situation, and they get a book from a guy named Paul Harvey. They listen to the audiobook and it doesn't seem to be too helpful, but regardless they try to have a romantic bath, which also doesn't go too well either. They then try a vacation at a motor lodge, but after not leaving a renovation they are forced to stay in a utility room. Homer tries to make it work, but the wise guy coming into their room clearly doesn't do anything for them. So they arrive home, their love life more broken than ever. Grampa asks Homer what the problem is and figures out that it's him and his sons and Marge's sex life. Homer returns Grampa to the retirement home. Grampa makes a remedy for Homer and gives it to him, even though Homer tried to leave before Grampa even made it. Homer drinks it and the effects are instant. Homer rushes home, dismisses the kids, and him and Marge have a night of love. After their session, Marge tells Homer that he should try and sell the tonic and go into business with Grampa. Homer reluctantly kind of agrees. Now this is technically our plot point too for the episode, but it does solve the conflict with Homer and Marge's sex life, so it could be seen as the climax? No pun intended there. However, a lot of sitcoms take this structure of having one conflict solved that then leads into a new conflict, so we'll count it as plot point 2. Homer and Grampa begin to make the tonic in a bathtub. Homer tries to sell it, it doesn't have a great deal, he gets hit, so Grampa goes in on this large sale pitch and it's a hit with the townsfolk and a success, and he sells many a bottle. We see many couples drinking it and improving their love lives, which I think was a nice touch to the episode to show how this tonic actually works. Grampa sets up on the road with Homer to try and sell the tonic nationwide, so this is our midpoint, or the no turning back point if you will. Grampa and Homer are full on with this scheme. They do not have great success in one sort of southern redneck-ish town, as Homer and Grampa didn't figure out their scheme and they're chased. Homer and Grampa sort of stop by this old farmhouse, which turns out to be the house that Homer grew up in. And we get a flashback of a young Homer ruining the farming business for Grampa, giving us a nice little backstory for why the cows were all spooked and why the family had to leave the farm. The place is a dump though, we get some jokes with things falling on top of the 2 men, and we get some more flashbacks with Homer pretending to be JFK as a young kid. Homer then recalls that Grampa shot down his dreams of ever being the president. Homer asks his dad why he never gave him any encouragement, and Grampa argues that Homer locked him inside of a retirement home and gave some crappy Christmas gifts. They argue some more on the car ride back, and Grampa reveals that he took that tonic the night Homer was conceived, and that Homer was an accident. Homer pulls over and tells Grampa to get out of the car and leaves him on the side of the road. This is our plot point 2, obviously, or the no return point. The relationship between Homer and Grampa is shattered and all hope of their tonic business is lost. I do have to say though, Although it's reinforced with flashbacks, the conflict seems a little shoehorned into the story. I think it would have been better if maybe we had something earlier on to suggest that Grampa and Homer had remnants of this conflict. Like, maybe Homer is the one to sell the tonic in the mall scene, and Grampa doesn't give him any praise for this. It just feels a tiny bit shoehorned in, is all. It's not a major issue, but it feels like the conflict in this episode keeps shifting a little. You know, it starts with the love life, then it's getting the tonic business going, before it then changes to this relationship conflict. Grandpa comes back the next day with flowers. Marge asks Homer if he's actually going to ignore Grandpa for the rest of his life, and he does say he is going to, but Marge points out the hypocrisy as Homer has told Bart he was an accident many a time. But you know, when Homer does it, it's cute. Homer tells the kids he's going to spend more time with them, whilst Grandpa tries to sell the tonic on his own with the help of Barney. Homer continues to try to be a great father and makes a fool out of himself and is being way too pushy with the kids. Homer goes back to the farm to sort of do some thinking and questions how he's meant to be a good father when he never had a good father himself. Again, sort of a new-ish conflict. I don't know. It sort of feels a little added on. Homer goes to burn this photo he finds of a younger Homer and Santa, but he realizes that Santa was Grandpa. And the Grandpa was not always neglectful, and sometimes he tried to be a good father, but in typical Homer Simpson fashion, the fire burns the photo and sets the room he's in alight. In the other room, across the other side of the farm, Grandpa burns the tonic and sets the room he's in on fire. Both men run out and meet each other just on the porch. And I gotta say, I really love this climax. Despite some of the stuff leading up that was plotted out to bring these two together, I love the idea and the execution is awesome. Just love that shot of them both rushing out and bumping into each other. The two men reconcile and declare that they are both screw-ups, and Grandpa tells him that he is not sorry that he had him, and he is proud that he is not a short man. They hug as the farmhouse collapses, and they stop, drop and roll to put out the fire that's caught on them. A really nice resolution, I've gotta say. I think this is one of the better resolutions for a relationship conflict in The Simpsons, so huge thumbs up for this. Despite it being a bit messy with the shifting conflict, the episode is all about Grandpa and Homer having a hiccup in their relationship that they eventually overcome. On that front, I think the plot is really solid. All the plot points make sense, so the episode is paced really well. Some aspects do feel a little shoehorned in, like I said. The flashbacks I think make sense because they are invoked from the farmhouse and these memories, and they were a pleasant surprise to get a look into Homer and Grandpa's earlier life. The climax and resolution are amazing, so overall the main plot is really tight and really solid. Let's move on to the B-plot. The B-plot is set up well, with quickly introducing Bart and his fear of UFOs in the opener, so this is our inciting incident to this conflict. We get another nod to it in the bookstore where Bart gets a book about UFOs. After all the adults are busy, the kids are left in the town with nothing to do, but Bart has a theory that it has something to do with the UFOs, something he learnt from his book, so it must be true. This is our plot point 1. Bart and the kids watch the adults from the treehouse and see them drinking the tonic and going inside and closing the blinds and all that, and Bart is convinced that they are paving the way for an alien attack, but Milhouse thinks the government have him, and the two kids fight. Lisa breaks it up, telling them that all the adults are actually reverse vampires. And I guess this is the midpoint. It just kind of escalates like this. Bart and Milhouse have this long, convoluted idea of what is going on, where they implement everyone's theories and intertwine everything for this big conspiracy. Then this B-plot just sort of fizzles out. We see Bart and Lisa later in the episode, but they don't touch on the B-plot at all, and they rather just get on with the main plot. It's a shame because it was quite well set up in the beginning, but we get no climax, no resolution, no real breaking up point. It just kind of ends. So I don't have too much to say about the B-plot, as it turns out to be pointless and goes nowhere. Despite it having a few funny moments, it really does have no purpose. They really should have just added something to wrap it up. Like maybe they follow Kirk and they find him in this kinky vampire alien costume and the kids think that their theory is true. Or maybe just simply they figure out the real truth and they're all just a little traumatized by that truth. Many ways they could have taken it, but instead they just abandoned it altogether. Overall, the A-plot is solid and the B-plot is pointless. Still, the A-plot is the majority of the episode, so far the episode is in my good books. This episode is quite adult, with a heavy sexual theme, and this show is not just for adults, so let's see if those jokes are up to scratch. So overall, I think the jokes in this episode are really good. The first that I want to talk about, and I know it's technically a cutaway, and normally I hate cutaways, but I really like the bait and switch UFO book scene joke. We think that this signal is traveling to the Pentagon and the White House will be all about the UFO book, but rather it's about Al Gore's first book sale. I don't know, I just think it's quite clever. I really love the joke with Marge and Homer where they throw out the relationship tape and then just run it over for good measure. What's so unappealing about your elderly father talking about sex? Sometimes I like Grampa, sometimes I don't. In this episode, I think the humour is done alright, though nothing amazing. This one was a bit... I don't know how to feel about this joke, really. Really love the montage of scenes implying that Homer and Marge have just had sex. If you didn't know, often in early cinema, because of censorship, you couldn't show a sex scene on film, so filmmakers would often use things like trains going through tunnels to imply that two characters just had sex. So this is a nice callback to early cinema, and also a way to avoid younger audience members being exposed to, well, you know, stuff you would see on Rule 34. I love Mod and Ned trying to get Homer's pants out the tree, Just Stamp the Ticket Man hitting Homer, Hibbert dismissing the mild poisoning. These are just all great jokes. Really love Grandpa putting the flowers through the door as well. I don't know, it's just funny. There's many more good jokes, but these are just some of the best. I don't think any joke in this episode is bad. None of them had me rolling my eyes or cringing. I don't think every second is laugh out loud, but certainly a smile stayed on my face throughout this episode. But are the characters done well? Let's see. So our protagonist for this one is definitely Homer. Grandpa is a huge part of it, but I'd argue he's an ally to Homer and then later on an antagonist. Homer is presented quite normally. He's his normal self. I like the inner conflict with his relationship with Grandpa. It's relatable and he's presented fairly positively. Him being a hypocrite could paint him in a bad light, but rather I just think it paints Grandpa in a better light. Not saying I'm on Grandpa's side, but I think it's a nice touch so Grandpa doesn't seem like the literal devil. Like I said before, I think it would have been better if Homer had done something to make Grandpa proud earlier on, and then Grandpa doesn't give him that praise, so they had this relationship hiccup mapped out a bit more. But regardless, I think Homer's characterization in this episode is very good. Okay, then we have Grandpa. I'm gonna go on a little bit of a rant here, because I don't care how many times Grandpa dressed up as Santa Claus. He's an abusive, neglectful, uncaring asshole. I mean, maybe a product of his generation and his time, but to suck all the motivation out of your child just proves how much of a crappy father he was. That being said, I still like the resolution, and I do think Grandpa has a good reason to be mad at Homer. Homer did dump him in a home after all, but that was after. Grandpa was still a bad father early on, as presented in the flashbacks. But I believe in forgiveness, so I think the resolution does redeem Grandpa a little bit. I think Grandpa has always been shown to be this terrible father, so it's nothing out of character, that's for sure. I just would have liked maybe something more to help me sympathise with him, but again, I think that Grandpa is presented fairly positively, I'm just nitpicking. We get a little bit from Bart and Lisa, but nothing to really comment on. Bart makes sense as the UFO-obsessed conspiracy theory nutjob, but I expected Lisa to tell him he's dumb and dump him down a little bit, but instead she just brings up vampires. Weird. This episode was made years before Twilight. Overall, I think the characters are well presented in this episode. I like the relationship hiccup between Homer and Grandpa, so overall I'm happy with the characters. So let's wrap it up and move over to the score. So this episode, like I said, has a lot of great things. A well plotted and paced A-plot with a near perfect climax and resolution, a great character relationship arc with Homer and Grampa, and an abundance of good jokes. But it does have some bad, and that's mainly the B-plot. It's fixable with one scene, but it still brings the episode down a little. However, overall, I still think this is a good episode. I think there is a bit of shoehorning in the plot, in the A-plot, but nothing too serious. So with that being said, I give Grampa vs. Sexual Inadequacy a solid 8 out of 10. Maybe being a bit generous, but I forgive that B-plot because I love the A-plot. Now, let's move on to the wheel. So the next episode I will be reviewing is... let's see... Barthood. Alright.